croaking, that looks bad, but it's not. It's actually helping hold moisture in the soil longer until you get some rain. Our old standby showing disturbance on the land is woolly croton. There are 21 different crotons in the state of Texas, but this is one that we commonly call doveweed. They also call it goatweed. It has croton oil in it, and that's what gives it the odor if you go out and mow it. But again, the fruit up here, the female flower, has 3 seeds in it, just like the snow on the prairie, and is excellent bird food. But again, cows, sheep, goats, and deer do not eat this as a forb in their diet. As we're here on the Davis Ranch, one of the dominant perennial plants that would serve as a weed in these coastal Bermuda grass fields and where we have drainage would be this one that I'm holding here, called western ragweed. Now, western ragweed being a sunflower, here are the flowers that are currently coming out. Aren't they pretty? Don't you want to have some of this in your yard and in your rock garden? Well, you probably already do. But one way we know that this is a perennial is that underground we have a modified stem called a rhizome that ends up helping the western ragweed to form a colony. So not only does it have viable seed production, but it reproduces through the rhizome. And so here is the effect of the rhizome. As the rhizome comes out, look at this bud on the rhizome that is now generating another western ragweed plant. So this is called vegetative reproduction. The value of the plant is on wet sites, the western ragweed produces in a king a seed that is going to be in the top 10 foods of dove and quail. And dove and quail like to eat and bathe in areas that are disturbed, meaning a lot of weeds come up, because a lot of our weed species are plants that produce the kind of seed that seed-eating birds are going to use. But as my management declines, or maybe I do not follow good guidelines for fertility program, plants like western ragweed, and we'll call it a weed, they become more prominent and dominant in my pasture over time. So here is a perennial, western ragweed, and it is native to the state. The second plant that I've picked up is one that will appear in all the wildflower books because of these beautiful purple tubular flowers. And being a member of the foxglove family, it's saying that the stigma is laying on the bottom of the tube to collect pollen as a pollinator comes in on the plant. But this plant is the genus AgriLife heterophylla, called Prairie Terraria or Prairie AgriLife. It is a plant that comes up in the spring, flowers in the late summer and early fall, and then as the plant dies, it turns totally black with a black fungus that's living on the outside of the plant. When it breaks off at the ground level, then the plant rolls around through the pasture and all the seed, because the foxgloves, the Scrophulariaceae, inside this pod of one flower is over 300 seed, and they're smaller than poppy seed. So one plant can get away 1 year, and because of all the flowering of a good rainfall summer, you'll end up with a whole bunch of this the following years. But AgriLife Gerardia, Prairie Gerardia, a common name on that annual plant that has moved from the coast inland and here into Walker County. This is a plant that is native of almost all of South America, and it's called Brazilian Verbena. And one way we look at a verbena is this flowering seed. The flower head here has little bitty bluish to purple, what we'll call Sweet William flowers. So we have a lot of verbenas in the state of Texas. These verbenas are characterized by having square stems, so that the stems are not round, but they're square. So the verbena family is another family like the mints that can have a square stem. The Brazilian verbena is beginning to move into our disturbance regime, and being a non-native plant, it means that its value is very little because native wildlife do not eat a plant that they don't know anything about. But Brazilian verbena, we're doing work through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service today, this year in 2015, and starting back in 2014 to come up with a chemical recommendation for spraying this plant. When I get up to Anderson County, the old age Brazilian verbena can have woody stems at the base. The top looks the same, but the woody base is up to 1 inch in diameter with white bark. So that's a plant we want to try to avoid. Because our disturbances can be caused by drought, can be caused by fire, it can be caused by grazing too much of our grass and keeping the grass too short, we have a sundry of annual plants. The first one that is not very common in this pasture, but it's growing in the areas where the water collects, and it has this fruit that oftentimes is called the porcupine egg. This is called Cocklebur, and this species of Cocklebur is a native plant to Texas. This is not some foreign plant that has come in, but its presence in a pasture can tell me that the soils hold a lot of water, they're wet for a large portion of the year, and yet the Cocklebur is a plant I want to avoid growing because it is poisonous when it's young, and the seed are poisonous to our grazing livestock, mainly our cattle. We have one other Cocklebur in the Panhandle and down into the rolling plains and the Edwards Plateau called spiny Cocklebur, and it is actually an introduced plant from Europe. One that has been a rather frequent dominant across the southeast Texas pastures this year is the snow on the prairie. And the snow on the prairie has these beautiful leaf-like bracts subtending the flowers that make us realize that it is a relative of the poinsettia that is a native of Mexico. This plant is a native of the coastal prairie. It does exude white milk. It's not a milkweed. 5 different families of plants in Texas have a white sap inside the plant. But this one is going to be frequent on areas that have been disturbed and common to the spurges, with only a few exceptions. I have a fruit here that is a 3 locular capsule with 3 seed in there, and the seed are rather large, and they're excellent bird food and especially turkey food. So this is one that is telling me the grass was short, the land was bare and open. In the spring when it germinated, it goes to flower here in the late summer and fall, and then it dies. It does not provide much protective cover of our soil. But being in the poinsettia family, it's got characteristics that help me see that these bracts that are white are not a part of the flower. The actual flower can have a bunch of white glands around it. But for humans, if I get the white milk that comes out of the leaf and the stem, if I get the white milk on my finger, I want to be sure while I'm pulling them and working in the yard that I wash my hands, because that white milk is acrid and it has some poison toxins in it that will make our eye close up, and if I get a lot of the white sap on me, it will actually cause a dermatitis effect and burn my skin and cause it to be reddened. Another frequently found plant this year, another sunflower like the ragweed. This is a sister. But when I look up in the flower head, each flower is subtended by a leaf-like bract. That tells me that this is the sumpweeds or the genus Iva. And again, this plant is in full flower. So not all sunflowers are yellow, but our sunflowers, about 850 different sunflowers that are native to the state. This one only has disc flowers with no ray flowers to give it color that attract pollinators who will eat that ray petal as a food source and then yet pollinate the flower. As we drove through the pasture, we ran into a stand of this broadleaf sumpweed, and the broadleaf sumpweed, when we hit these flower heads, the pollen went through the air. For this area of the state, the number one cause of fall hay fever is the pollen of this sunflower. And so when the pollen sacs come out, then I can hit this plant and a cloud of pollen will come out of it. Those that are allergic to the sumpweeds, the narrowleaf and the broadleaf sumpweed, you need to stay out of areas where this is common and dominant at this time of year, or it will excite your allergy and get your response up so that you will feel sick and not feel very good. One of the common annuals that is here, and this is out of the drainage area and the pasture, has this seed head right here. This is an annual grass. Even though it gets fairly large, this is called barnyard grass. And it's a sister to jungle rice, and it's common in wet areas. It loves wet soils, but it does not serve as cattle food, sheep food, or goat food. And it's one that I want to keep my main grass crop covering the ground, or I get a lot of this non-usable grass. Again, it's an echinocloa, and it's an introduced annual grass from a foreign country called barnyard grass. It loves disturbed areas. That was a good one.